So we're given a function f, and we're asked to describe the end behavior of the function. So what that means is you really need to know what the graph of this function looks like. And first off, you need to know that this is a quadratic function because it has an x squared in it. So after you get to that point, you need to know what this looks like. So quadratic function, when you graph it, looks like a U. The coefficient of x squared, so the number in front of the x squared, which in this case is 1, because there's not a number written there. So that means there's a 1 there that we don't write. That coefficient determines whether this is a u that opens upward or a u that opens downward. If it's positive, it opens upward. So the graph of this is going to be a u that opens upward. So something like, I'm really terrible at drawing these, so wow, that was pretty good. So something like that. If you had a negative in front of the x squared, then it would open the other way. It would go down. Okay, so it looks like this. Now to answer this question, I don't need to know exactly what this graph looks like. I don't need to know where the vertex is. I'm good. So all I need to know is what the end behavior is. Now the end behavior, so what I'm going to move this graph. I'm just going to graph it over here. And again, what I'm drawing here is not the actual graph of this function because I don't really care. I'm just looking at the end behavior, which is what happens on these points that keep going forever. What happens there? And so the graph would not look exactly like this, but all I care about is that it's a U going upward. Okay. So it says as x approaches negative infinity. So we look at our x-axis, and as we approach negative infinity, meaning as we go from right to left, what happens to f of x, which is the y value? So as I move this way, so let's start here. As I move to the left, you can see the y value is going up. And actually, since there's an arrow here, this is going to keep going up forever. And it just keeps going. And so that means that it is going to approach infinity. So let me write that down. So on the actual test, you would just click the choose button and select infinity. So there's my infinity symbol. And then it says as x approaches positive infinity. So that's just looking at the other side now. So as I go to the right, so as x gets bigger, what happens to the y value? And it's the same thing. It just keeps going, and it's also going to approach infinity. So this one is also infinity. So the key here is that you need to know what the graph of a quadratic function looks like. Now, for this question, you didn't need to know how to graph it perfectly. And again, this graph is not the actual graph. It's just the general representation of it. Now, think about if there was a negative here in front of the x squared, so the u was facing the other way, then you would see that your y values would be going down and they would be approaching negative infinity. So then this answer would be negative infinity instead of positive infinity. Okay, so I hope that helped you out. Keep it up and you will master the math.